and welcome to Mando Mondays. We just had an extra person in here. My name is Mike Celestino. I'm the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at laughingplace.com. We do this every Monday during the Mandalorian season, but usually you would see Laughing Place co founder Rebecca Mosley here next to me. But she is unavailable this week, so we have special surprise guest Jeremiah Good joining me. Jeremiah, how's it going?
What's up, Mike? It's been like 3 days since I talked to you last.
Yes, we've been talking to each other a lot about Star Wars and other stuff, but yeah, we're gonna do a nice recap of this most recent episode of The Mandalorian. But first, we're gonna talk about the new merchandise that was announced today for Mando Monday this week, and it starts with some beanies. Looks like this is a child's seafoam beanie for a baby with ears. So
See,
that's pretty
I would
cute.
wear that if they had the adult version.
I can't say the same, but I think it's very adorable. Um, and that's $45 available December 7th, which is last week. Uh, and then a black one for, I guess this is for all ages, right? $40 with Mando and the child there.
Would this be the Black Series beanie? And there's the Gray Series beanie?
Right. So this is kind of the Beskar armor helmet, and the color is representing that as well. $40 from Love Your Melon. A little the child, cartoonish kind of the child beanie. Lots of beanies.
Comes in handy in
40,
California and Florida
40
for us.
bucks. Available today, December 14th. What's that about? Yeah, yeah, Florida. Um, More beanies.
I kind of feel like they're just cutting and pasting at the art at this point.
Okay, now we got a watch. The child automatic watch. It's $60, and that is going to be available the 18th, which is the end of this week. What's the company name? Mister Watches. Is that right?
Mr.
MSTR
Watches,
watches.
fine timepieces since some time.
And it's got little Grogu there, and then there's one that's got the Mudhorn and the Mythosaur skull. Also from MSTR watches, 450 bucks, or 399 to 400. This one is what is this? It's The Way. It just says The Way, and it's $40 from Mando. Oh, is a vinyl? No, it's a silkscreen print. Okay, from Mando. Then we got lots of apparel and some Black Series figures. This is another print. It looks like.
Yeah, that is the Mando print.
Oh, that's cool, and it's got some Arabish.
Yeah,
Oh, it
the
says
Arabish is the variant. I mean,
ah,
it's Mando, so you know it'll be one of the nicest posters you'll ever buy, and then you have to buy the variant too, so you can put them both up next to each other.
yeah, that's a cool one. A lot of dead stormtroopers around him, and
They're
the
just
and
sleeping.
that's right. A phone case from somebody that's gone. The child is an in-game giveaway in the Sims free play. You can download it right now at EA.com. I've played The Sims for a total of like a couple hours.
That's a couple hours more than I have,
Okay.
but getting Grogu there, I would almost want to play it.
Yeah, that's fun. Okay, so now we're getting into the stuff that I care about. This is the Black Series from Hasbro. Now this Tusken Raider is a re-release. I guess they're putting it back out because they were featured heavily in this season in the first episode of the season. So that's cool to have that available again. These they kind of go out of print. They're tougher to get. You got to get them on eBay, but now you can get them, and they have different packaging. They have that cool 50th anniversary Lucasfilm packaging for these figures. It comes with the gaffy stick. This is the Shore Trooper from Scarif from Rogue One getting re-released, but we did see some this week in this week's episode on the planet with the big heist that happened. So we're going to talk
I
about that later.
I want to say was it. It wasn't this. Yeah, it was this past Comic Con or the last real Comic Con. I guess they kind of addressed how they were going to start to do this, kind of re-releasing the figures that are the only way you can get them were on eBay when they kind of come into play, which is perfect because these are both being featured in the Mandalorian.
Yeah, I think that's probably their plan. You know, they knew which characters were going to pop up again. This is the tank pilot, the hover tank pilot, which the ones that we saw in this week's episode of The Mandalorian, they had the black helmet, but I guess this was the color that they had released previously. So this is another release, the hover tank driver re-release.
Yeah, the helmet is a little different though. Also on the hover tanks from this past episode.
Yeah. And then we also had a Death Trooper, which we've seen flanking Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian. So it's cool to have that available again in the 6-inch Black Series.
And I think that's the one that everybody got excited for today.
Yep, this is the one that I just pre-ordered about half an hour ago on HasbroPulse.com. It's Bo-Katan Kryze, as played by Katie Sackhoff in the Clone Wars and then Rebels, and then now in The Mandalorian. We saw her in one episode. Very, very nice looking figure, cool paint job. And it's going to be the one. I'm sure it's probably sold out already by now, but if you want to go check HasbroPulse.com, you might still be able to grab one.
Had Bo-Katan been released previously, or was this the first time?
First time in the 6-inch Black Series. Yeah. Big deal. Yeah. There's the packaging. Oh, and this is cool. This reminded me of like a. Do you remember the Popples growing up?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
So he's like in his little pram, the child Grogu, and then you open him up just like a popple, and he pops out from Hasbro as well. This, I
And
think it's $20.
that's one of the nice things about that one is some of the latest figures of the child haven't been, the cute ones. It's been more, oh look, it's the child. But I think that one definitely ranks up there as in the cuteness level. And I know some of the figures we have coming up are also really cute.
Yeah, that's true. They have the more of the bounty collection got announced today as well. But yeah, that's what he looks like
There,
outside of the pram. And then I think this is series 3 of the bounty collection. They had sent me series 2, all 6 in series 2, but now you've got one with him eating the little squid out of the bowl and then drinking looks like blue milk out of a mug. Trying to eat the eggs, of course. Everybody's favorite. And
that's like genocide figures.
and then meditating. Everybody flipped out over that pose he had a couple weeks ago. So you had to have one of those. Hiding under the Beskar helmet. And then it looks like he's just like playing with the data pad there in that 6th one. But those are the little bounty collection figures. And then this one is like Baby on Board, but with a very odd looking
Yeah.
Grogu.
This is where I was kind of aiming the. Some of them are really cute, some of them not so much, and this one is not so much. Like that's one of those ones you see a child on board, you're like, okay, I'm going to drive past this car.
This is from Mattel, and it's $20. You can get it at Target.com. And then some t-shirts. This is Mando and Boba Fett. Boba Fett with the new paint job on his helmet that we're going to talk about in the episode recap. And then you got Cara Dune and Fennec Shand in a hoodie, a zip-up hoodie there. And then some other images from this past week's episode. On top of the tank, the 2 ladies, and Moff Gideon. And then this is all the characters from this past week's episode, all the hero characters. So that's cool on a baseball type t-shirt. And then Migs Mayfeld. I thought it was M-I-G-S. Have I been spelling it wrong?
No,
Either
I'm
I
pretty
spelled
sure
it
it
wrong.
was MIGS and everything I've seen also.
Okay, either I spelled it wrong or they spelled it wrong on this shirt. But there's Bill Burr's character on a shirt. How much was the price there? If you want to hover over that again, $22.99 on Amazon. Boba Fett with the new armor paint and the new black undershirt in a long sleeve sweater. Looks pretty cool. And Fennec Shand and Cara Dune again in a long sleeve shirt. 32.99 on Amazon. It's
So
like
I'm
a
actually looking up the spelling.
Tumblr from Tervis, $30 at Tervis.com. Looks like you got Cara Dune, Moff Gideon from the concept art from this past week's episode. What you got, Jeremiah? You have a result?
So we really need to order that misprint shirt because every single thing. I mean, from Wikipedia, which of course we don't really count, Wikipedia, which we do count, and then like EW, everything has MIGS. So there we go.
Yeah,
Order it now.
I think I double checked that when I was writing my review, so I'm pretty sure it's MIGS. Is that it for the merch? I guess that's it. Are we ready to move on to the episode recap?
Let's do it.
Okay, it's season 2, episode 7 of The Mandalorian, chapter 15 overall. The title is The Believer, and we'll talk about why that's the title, I think, as we go along here. The director is Rick Famuyiwa. This is his third episode as a director of The Mandalorian. He did chapter 2 and chapter 6 last year. What did you think of The Believer overall, Jeremiah?
Overall, I really enjoyed it. I know a lot of the feedback from online is kind of like this was a non-episode, but I think both you and I are so used to going into major events, and you have to have that little breath in between the big finale, and that's exactly what this was.
Right, yeah, it was kind of a side quest. I did like it. I think it's, again, probably in my bottom half of this season as far as like favorites go. But I will say right off the bat here that this episode to me was anchored by the performance of Bill Burr, who I always think of as a stand-up comic, but I thought he was just such a great actor. I don't think of him as an actor. He's been in Breaking Bad. He's been in a bunch of other stuff as an actor, but I think he turned in a really excellent performance. Like I totally bought him, and I buy him in this universe as that character, and I am falling in love with that character of Mayfeld just existing as a kind of a different type of persona than what we've seen before in Star Wars. So it was really exciting to me to have an episode focused on him pretty much. Did you want to say something about that?
Well, I remember the episode last season, but it's not so clear in my head. But I don't recall him being almost kind of the compassionate, like
Yeah.
you cheer for him. He was a scum, like he was with that group. So this episode really did, in 30 some odd minutes, I went from, oh yeah, that character to, I hope this character has more episodes in the future.
Me too. Me too. I hope he pops up again, and we'll talk about why that's a possibility as we get to the end of the episode here. But yeah, I'm guessing that he has been meditating on his life a little bit because we open on him serving his sentence in the Carthon chop fields, which apparently is just a New Republic junkyard, basically filled with the wreckage of hundreds upon thousands of TIE fighters, which I thought was so cool looking. And you see those AT-AT kind of cranes again in the background we've seen before in this series and other places. But just a really neat design, I thought, for the junkyards. And these security droids come up and they call him out by his inmate number 34667, and they tell him he's got a new assignment, basically. And we get Cara Dune shows up.
I enjoyed the just the setup of that. It was one of those, you know, Mandalorian either seems to have amazing or just kind of like, okay, there's a giant show off of what they can do. And this one, I think, had a great mix. You could tell that, well, you couldn't tell what the difference between the practical set and the everything else was, but seeing all the TIE fighters and everything sitting in there was just, it was a very cool opening.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're seeing the image here, one of the screen captures, and I love the design. And I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure they built part of that practically, and then the rest was the volume there behind him. But so cool looking and so believable as a location, kind of off on the peripheral of the galaxy. So Cara Dune brings Mayfeld over to the Slave One, and there's a really funny moment where he sees Boba Fett coming down the ramp off the Slave One, and he goes, "For a second, I thought you were this other guy," and then of course there comes Mando down the ramp there, and they have this stare down a little
Yeah.
bit because, like you said last time he encountered him, he was kind of a jerk.
No, I enjoyed that. That setup was great. And Ming Na, even without having to say a single word, just in that opening bit, the look on her face and like, oh, yep, you're in trouble was just, she plays that perfect.
Right. So Ming Na Wen is also back as her character Fennec Shand, who we saw last week and then previously in season one, and Tamura Morrison, of course, is playing Boba Fett as he does now, and we see. Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay. So they talk about how they want to bring Mayfeld on board this mission because he was previously an Imperial sharpshooter, and he still knows the Imperial clearances and protocols. That was their reasoning for bringing him aboard the mission. And the next scene is them sitting inside the Slave One, and I really liked how we saw the exterior of the ship like rotating around the interior of the ship, which is something I've always wondered. You know, we've never seen, other than the cockpit, we've never seen the inside of the Slave One. So it was very cool that they finally like designed this out and showed it to us as an audience.
Yeah, because going back to Empire Strikes Back, we saw it lift off and went, "Oh, that's the coolest thing in the world." But it lifts off like this, and then it starts horizontal, goes vertical. You're like, "How is that practical?" And we still don't know how it's practical, but it still looks, it's one of the coolest ships in the universe.
Absolutely, and they talk about how they need the coordinates for Moff Gideon's cruiser, and they need Bill Burr's character Mayfeld to help them get it. And he's like asking like why, what's in it for me, basically. And they explain that Grogu has been taken. And I like Mayfeld's reaction. The little green guy.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh," just like the rest of us. "Oh, not the cute thing."
Yeah. Well, the last time we saw this character, he dropped Baby Yoda on the ground before we knew his name was Grogu. But yeah, so he did meet him briefly in season one. So Mayfeld talks about how they need to get access to an internal Imperial terminal on the planet Morak, which had not been mentioned before in Star Wars. This is a brand new planet created for this episode where he says there's a secret mining hub uh, and a refinery where they're harvesting rhydonium, which has been mentioned before in Star Wars. This volatile and explosive. Uh, what would you call it? An element, I guess.
Yeah, do we know, like, is that a prime thing that's needed for something, or do we just know it's an element that's dangerous?
I guess based on what we learn later in the episode, I guess they're just using it as an explosive because, well, we'll talk about later
Yeah,
why they're collecting it specifically on this planet. They talk about how there's anti-aircraft cannons and a platoon of security forces awaiting them on this planet. And then once they land, Mayfeld starts talking about how these remnant bases are run by XISB, which is the Imperial Security Bureau. That's popped up quite a few times around Star Wars lore, and that they will be scanning their genetic signatures, so they can't have anybody who's like wanted by the Empire. Though you would think Mayfeld, because he's kind of a deserter, I guess,
yeah,
that he would be. I don't know. Some of that stuff was not too clear to me because he's able to go in, but like Fennec Shand, she says she's wanted by the ISB, so she can't go in. And then Boba Fett has a really funny line that says, he says, "Let's just say they might recognize my face," and I
yeah. That
thought that
was
was great.
one of my favorite parts of the entire episode. Was that just kind of roundabout of like, "Not me, not me, no, not me."
Yeah, because as we know, Boba Fett's dad, Jango Fett, was the basis for all of the clone troopers in the Clone Wars. So Boba Fett is also a clone of Jango Fett and looks exactly like his dad, who was played by the same actor. So, yeah, he doesn't want to go into the Imperial base. So the Mandalorian basically agrees to go in, although the concern is that he has to remove his helmet, which we know he is unwilling to do from many previous episodes of this show. But he says he's not going to be showing his face. And then we cut to Mando, Cara Dune, and Mayfeld jumping onto the top of one of the tanks. And there's a great, very short action scene of Cara Dune taking out the pilots, the drivers of the tank, with her mixed martial arts skills.
Yeah, the action for that part was pretty quick. Like when you said that, I was like, wait, no, they just the next scene was Mando changing. But yeah, they did jump in and had to commandeer it, which, for even just the shortest action, it was really well done. And since it was such a tight scene, and that's something that they've seen to do a lot in Mando is tight fight scenes, tight battle scenes that keeps it flowing really quickly, and they do it very well.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned during our merchandise roundup, we get these tank troopers which had appeared first in Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So they are kind of still pulling from even like recently introduced Star Wars material, which is really cool. Although these were black, the suits were black, right? Yeah, you can see in the image there. Although there's some glare on them, and the toy that we saw earlier was one of the lighter colored ones. So they're putting on the armor, like you said, and Mando asks Cara Dune to keep his armor safe, the Beskar armor, the Mandalorian armor. And Mayfeld's kind of making fun of Mando for wearing the tank driver armor now. But then they start driving toward their destination, which is this base, and they start talking. And Mayfeld removes his helmet and says, I don't know how you people wear those things. And he gets in a good dig about how he's talking about the Mandalorians
Yes.
when he says you people.
That was one of my favorite. Yes, by you people, I mean Mandalorians.
And then Fennec Shand is up in the jungle in the canopy, like spotting them, covering them with her sniper rifle as they drive along. And we see more of them driving through the jungle. We see wreckage of other tanks that have come through here, so we start to get the danger of this Rhydonium as they drive along. We see them drive through a village. We see some of the locals of this planet, Morak, who are not that happy with the Imperial presence on this planet. And then we get a pretty entertaining and often funny and often kind of thought-provoking kind of a philosophical discussion of the Empire versus the New Republic. It reminded me, and I've seen other people make this comparison of the character DJ played by Benicio del Toro in The Last Jedi. Him kind of saying that everybody's kind of the same, no matter who's in charge. It's going to be the same thing. And Mayfeld says, if you're born on Mandalore, you're going to believe one thing. If you're born on Alderaan, you're going to believe something else. And then he starts talking about how he and Mando are alike, and Mando is not happy about that, obviously. But Mayfeld says, your rules start to change when you get desperate, which I think is kind of the overarching theme of this season a little bit.
Yeah, it gets really deep. I mean, watching that scene, you're used to Mandalorian just kind of being action, little bits of story here and there, but that scene was probably the deepest that I think they've gotten in the two seasons. And you do start to look at it. There was the book that just came out from I can't think of the title of it, but it was the different perspectives of what's going on, and that's what he's saying is it. It depends on what side of the line you're on, who's the villain and who's the hero.
Right. From a certain point of view, I think
Thank
is
you.
the book you're talking about.
Yeah.
But very specifically, Mayfeld points out that, Mando doesn't seem to have a problem taking off his helmet and putting on a different helmet. So what's the difference between that and showing his face? Like, he's just pointing out inconsistencies in the specific rules that he's following. So this is, I think, where the title of the episode starts to come in, because Mando is the believer. He believes in this creed that he's sworn to, but he is willing to bend the rules, if not break them, though he does break them later on, as we know in this episode, when it comes down to acting out of desperation to save Grogu, now who he's formed this attachment with. And Mayfeld basically ends the Michael Criscione says, so would Mando be considered a hero even though he is a bounty hunter? That's a good question. Bounty hunters famously take their jobs wherever they can find it. They work for all sorts of factions, different people. So yeah, is he considered a hero for that? What do you think, Jeremiah?
I think, again, it depends on which side of the line you're on. I mean, we've seen throughout the films and books bounty hunters and even, Imperials kind of following more when they see, wait, the Imperials are doing this, the Empire is doing this, maybe we are on the wrong side, and they'll kind of bend their reins a little bit. And I think this is a prime example of it, that Mandalorian is doing, or the Mando's doing what's right for right now. I don't think we can say he's a hero, but his task is to take care of somebody that can't take care of himself or herself. We don't know if Grogu is a boy or a girl, do we?
I think they have said he. I think
Okay.
characters have said he. Yeah. Mayfeld kind of concludes that discussion by saying, as long as you can make it through your day and still sleep at night, you're okay. So that's his philosophy and outlook on his making his way through the galaxy. So at that point, we enter into an extended action scene involving the tank, because we see out ahead of them, ahead of where they're driving, other tanks are exploding, basically, from this rhydonium, this volatile rhydonium. And then from behind them come these skiffs carrying what Mando calls pirates. But as other people have pointed out, I've seen in discussions of this episode, if they were pirates, they would be stealing the rhydonium. But instead, it looks like they just want to blow it up, which to me means they're probably more like freedom fighters or rebels.
Yeah, or they're probably just the inhabitants of the planet that it's getting destroyed by all this mining.
Yeah, like we said, when they drove through that village, we could tell that the locals are not happy with the Imperial presence there. So to me, these guys are fighting against the Empire, just like we saw Luke Skywalker and his friends fight against them. So it is a little bit of a conundrum, because we see our hero Din Djarin, as the comment just asked, like, is he a hero? He's blowing up people who are going up against the Empire, so we have to root for him because of his mission. But the people that he's fighting against are kind of on the side that we're used to being on. So I thought that was an interesting conflict in my head as a viewer watching this episode.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to more of the outcome as the episode goes on, but
Yeah.
I was feeling the same way. Also, how many of the pirates show up? Like, there are at least 7 skiffs that just kind of pop out of nowhere.
Right.
I was like, okay, and they all have thermal detonators. Just throw it. Just throw them. They don't need to be laid on the plutonium. Just throw it at the thing. But,
Right. So we get a few close calls, like you said. The pirates keep placing the thermal detonator on the tanks of rhydonium, and then Mando finds a way to, at the last second, blow them up with it instead of the tank. And there were we talked about Indiana Jones, Rebecca and I, last week, and there were some moments in this that reminded me of the tank chase in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade here and there. So
mm-hmm.
I wonder if that was intentional, but certainly it was reminiscent of it to me. There's a funny moment where Mando's blaster just kind of dies, like he can't fire it anymore, and I think he just throws it at them, and
Yeah.
then there's a great moment with throwing this like spear thing into one of their chests, and then there's a moment where one of the pirates like falls over the cockpit or the driver's
Slides
section.
down.
Yeah, and he just gets run over by the tank, which is right out of even Raiders of the Lost Ark, another Indiana Jones action scene. Um, so he tells Mayfeld to start driving faster because there's more pirates coming. Um, Now they're worried about the way they're driving because you have to apparently keep at a proper speed to not move around the rhydonium too much, or there's going to be an explosion, which led me to ask, like, why are they transporting it this way in the first place? Like,
Yeah,
why
the
not
whole
put
thing of like, watch your speed. Oh, okay. If you're, I mean, these had to be designed for that, or
right?
like, couldn't they have done something to make it a little bit easier to drive? But plot points, need to keep it going.
Right, yeah, but I was thinking, like, why not put it on a hover tank or something that flies and doesn't have to bounce along the ground? Almost everything else in Star Wars is hovering or flying, so it's very strange. But they must have a reason, you know. The Empire must have a reason. Okay, so they approach the bridge, which leads to the base, and there's more pirates coming, a whole bunch more. Like you said, they send a bunch more skiffs after them, and then they are saved by TIE fighters, of all things, blasting all the pirates away. So it's a little bit of a weird conflict because we're used to rooting against the Empire, and in this moment, the Empire saves our heroes. As they enter and cross the bridge, and a bunch of stormtroopers and shore troopers from Rogue One that we saw the action figure before earlier come out and help them blast away the pirates. They're all saluting as well as the
Yeah,
tank crosses the bridge. And then as they get into the base, everyone is applauding. What did you think of that scene?
it was very interesting. I mean, we're so used to when we hear the TIE fighter scream, it's like, oh, something bad's happening. But they start blowing away the pirates, and you start cheering. And I want to say that they cut up to the ladies up on the mountain at one point, and they both kind of look like, did that just happen?
Right.
But it
Uh,
needs, that again, from a certain point of view, everything is either good or bad.
True enough. So they find themselves inside the base now, and everyone is applauding them, cheering them, slapping them on the back, and they got to find this terminal to access to get the information they want. And Mayfeld says it's going to be in the officers' mess. He goes in to access the terminal, and he sees his former commanding officer named Valen Hess, another new character played by an actor named Richard Brake, who's popped up in a few things over the years. I did recognize him. I wasn't sure right away where I knew him from, but he's just one of those actors that you see here and there. So he wants to abort the mission because he thinks this guy's going to recognize him. And Mando's like, we've made it this far. I got to go in there. We got to get this information. But Mayfeld says that in order to access the terminal, it has to scan your face. Now, other people have pointed this out as well. I thought it was very odd that it's not a facial ID. They're not scanning your face
Yeah.
and running it through a database. It just needs to prove that you have a face. Like,
It, the whole thing, like, one, why is the terminal inside the mess hall? Like, out of everything, shouldn't it, you have to go into a mess hall to access one specific terminal that they don't have anyplace else?
right?
And the whole scanning the face thing really didn't make any sense to me at all.
No, I think Alex on Star Wars Explained said it was like when you go to a website and it asks you to prove you're not a robot by clicking certain things. So this was like the Star Wars equivalent of that. Prove you're not a droid because you have a face. I don't know. Um, but yeah, basically to do this, Din Djarin has to remove his helmet for the second time in the entire series, episode 15 now. He's taken off his helmet and we see Pedro Pascal's face for the second time ever. And my question at this point was, why is he maintaining his facial hair?
I agree with that. But I also think when he does finally remove the mask or the helmet, it is such a poignant moment in the episode or in the entire series. It's not just a random, which is something I think they've done very well of. He has his belief, and he doesn't remove his helmet for any reason. This shows that the one true reason that he will do it or go to the extremes is for the child.
Absolutely, and we see that the officers, including Hess, are kind of watching him do this as he does access the information. He gets what he needs on that like data stick, but he starts getting accosted by these Imperial officers. One of them comes over and asks him his operating number, I think,
Mhm.
and Mayfeld has to like step in, and he says like, "You're gonna have to speak up to him since his vessel lost pressure in." Okay, so this is a deep cut Star Wars reference that I loved because it's a reference to the Battle of Tanab, which is referenced in Return of the Jedi. Because when Han is asking Lando how he got promoted to general in Return of the Jedi, Lando says somebody must have heard about my little maneuver at the Battle of Tanab, but Bill Burr pronounces it Tanab. But when you look at the caption, it is spelled the same. So that was like, okay, this is an intentional little Easter egg that they put in there. So the Imperial officer just starts talking like somebody would to like a deaf person
Yes,
if they
I love
don't know the
that part.
proper. Yeah.
What's
Um,
your TK number?
yeah. And then Mayfeld says we just call him Brown Eyes, which is funny because this is the first time Mayfeld is seeing Mando without his helmet on, so I guess that's what he's taking in his eye color. And then there's a very funny reference to the movie Office Space, which I was not expecting. When Mayfeld says they have to go fill out their TPS reports. So yeah, there's an Office Space reference in Star Wars.
Yeah, that one was probably one of the most random things that you could possibly throw in. You would never expect, well, you'd never expect a lot of references, but really, Office Space?
I don't know. I'm a big fan of Office Space, so I appreciated it. People who don't know that movie are not gonna know what they're talking about, so it was fine with me. Very funny Mike Judge film. Check it out if you haven't seen it.
If you
Um,
haven't seen it by now, you really need to go see it.
yeah, absolutely. So the officer actually, it actually turns out that the officer's not upset at them. He just wants to congratulate them on being the only transport to deliver their shipment in that day, and he offers them a drink. He wants them to come have a drink with them. And meanwhile, we see Cara Dune and Fennec Shan out in the jungle again, planning to take out the big cannons and the troopers that are waiting outside the base there. And then we cut back to inside the mess hall. And this scene immediately made me think of the movie Inglorious Bastards, the Quentin Tarantino film. Are you familiar with that one?
I have not seen it,
Okay.
sadly. It is one of those ones that every time it's around, I'm like, oh, I want to watch that. Nope.
I'm pretty sure what they were going for here is a similar tension that they built in that Quentin Tarantino film. There's a scene where our heroes who are undercover as Nazis have to share a drink with a bunch of Nazis, and there's this long discussion before they're revealed to be spies, basically. But yeah, this scene reminded me of that right off the bat. I loved that Bill Burr's character Mayfeld offers a toast to Operation Cinder, which, if you've been paying attention to Star Wars canon in the past 5+ years, this has been mentioned in a bunch of different media, including the Battlefront video games, some of the novels here and there. And basically, Operation Cinder was after the Emperor died, he left behind this contingency plan to be enacted upon his death, where basically he just wanted the galaxy like wiped out and as much of the opposition just destroyed in his wake, including some Imperial casualties, which Bill Burr talks about here, and that's why he's telling us, the audience, why he ended up defecting from the Empire, because he wasn't happy with how Operation Cinder turned out.
Yeah, that was a deep cut. I mean, I've enjoyed some of the references that have tied everything together, but I think that one, we're not going directly off a film or a character that is prominent. This is an operation that is talked about in the video games and a couple of the books. I mean, one of the things, I read the Aftermath books, And when I went and looked up Operation Cinder, I was like, that's not even referenced in the Aftermath books, which I thought it would be because it's such a prominent part of the history post Battle of Yavin and Battle of Endor.
Yeah, they talk about it quite a bit in the Alphabet Squadron
Mm-hmm.
novels, which I love. Those are great, and they kind of detail a little bit more what happened there. So if you want to learn more about Operation Cinder, I think play Battlefront and then play or read Alphabet Squadron, those novels by Alexander Freed. Very good. So we get more discussion about Operation Cinder in a place called Burnin Con, which is a specific mission in Operation Cinder, and Mayfeld talks about how an entire city was gone in moments. They lost 5 to 10,000 Imperial troops in that battle, and Hess, the officer, says it was a small sacrifice for a greater good. And Bill Burr starts talking about how, was it good for the people who died? And Hess says that the New Republic is in complete disarray at this point, and the Imperial remnant is growing stronger. So we're getting hints of the plan to come back as the First Order and stuff like that. At this point, there's a really funny moment where Mayfeld looks up at Mando or Din Djarin without the helmet on, and he's just kind of going like don't do this, don't push it too far.
Yeah,
What did
just
you think of
let
this
it
part?
go. Just we can walk out of here. One of the other things about Operation Cinder that when I was reading into it, is it just me or does Elon Musk putting a bunch of satellites around the US, around the world kind of fit into Operation Cinder's plans a little bit?
I sure hope not. Well, I
Lots
guess
of
we'll find
Wi-Fi or destroying the Earth. Okay.
we'll find out. So the thing that kind of breaks Mayfeld is Hess talks about how the rhydonium that they delivered today in that tank was going to help them create havoc that makes Burnin Khan just pale by comparison. And at that moment, you see Mayfeld. He's just like, "No, this is it. As much as this is going to put us in danger, I'm not going to let this go." And Hess also says like, everybody thinks they want freedom, but what they really want is order, which to me again was a kind of a reference to the First Order coming down the line. And then he offers a toast to the Empire, and that's it from Mayfeld. He just takes out his blaster and
Yeah.
shoots him right there, which of course causes complete chaos in the mess hall, and starts off another action scene.
I enjoyed the officers when the first shots fired. They all kind of just look like, what just
Right,
happened? And then it starts like a couple of seconds later, which I think is more realistic than
right.
everybody just start shooting within seconds of the first bolt flying.
Yeah, definitely. And I also thought it was odd that like once they had killed everybody in the mess hall, there's like a couple beats before like more troopers arrive, and I thought, well, you could still cover for this. You could say like, oh, these guys just started shooting each other, like they still could have gotten away, but they just start shooting the other troopers.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into the wait. This is two men against a large platoon. How is this going to work out? But it's called the Mandalorian for a reason.
Yeah, they're stormtroopers, man. They're bad shots. I did like the line when the action starts to break out. Mayfeld hands Din Djarin back his helmet, the tank driver helmet, and he says, "You did what you had to do. I never saw your face." So this is we are getting a little glimpse of the humanity inside Mayfeld here, because he knows how important it is to Mando not to remove his helmet, and he's kind of giving him that out of pretending like he never saw his face, which I thought was kind of him.
Yeah, that scene was very well done. And I to go back and this is you and Rebecca talking a few weeks ago, where the whole Boba Fett Mando conversation about removing your helmet and everything came into play. And I don't know if I want to see Mando go that way, where he's no longer the believer where you have to have your helmet on at all times, or if it does become more of like a special moment or a special reason, like we've seen in the two times he's removed it.
Right. Yeah. I do think he's going to find like a happy medium between those two. I would guess by the end of the season, by the end of the next episode, he's going to decide. I mean, I've been predicting this for a while now that this season's going to end with him kind of deciding he doesn't always need to wear the helmet, but we'll see how that plays out. So they
Those
leave.
that scene of him shaving.
Yeah. They leave through the window to escape the troops that are continue to come into the room, and they're over this big dam. Um,
Damn.
yeah, way down below them is a big dam with lots of water going through it. Michael asked, "Why is it that Mando can't remove it? Is it like to protect his identity, to where the Imperials can't track him or something?" I don't think it has anything to do with the Empire. I think this one sect of the Mandalorian belief that he follows is trying to go back to this ancient way of Mandalore where they never would remove their helmets. And like Bo Katan said a few weeks ago, this is just one almost kind of like a cult within the Mandalorian creed. So not everybody, not all Mandalorians follow this, but his one little sect of it, which was called the Children of the Watch, they're the ones that have to keep their helmets on, and I think that he is going to eventually drift away from that, if I had to guess. So they're over that dam. They're climbing along the window ledge and still taking out some more troopers. Fennec Shand and Cara Dune are firing down, helping them with their rifles. They're taking out the gunners on the cannons and stuff as well. Then they reach the rooftop, and Slave One approaches, and they jump aboard. I have to say, I did have a moment here when they were jumping onto the ramp of Slave One where I thought Mayfeld wasn't going to make it. Did you think the same thing?
I was the exact same. Like it was just going to be one of those.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been. I don't know if it would have been a good ending for him, but it would have been, a redemption ending
Yeah,
where
because we
he
especially
did his best.
right, because like I said, we did just see him kind of showing his humanity, especially like taking out the Empire when he didn't have to put himself in danger in that way, um, and showing that he is conflicted about his imperial past and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree, but I am glad that he survived because, like we said before, I do like this character and I do like Bill Burr as an actor. So they're taking off in the Slave One, and Mayfeld says, "Hand me that rifle," and he fires upon the Rhydonium tanks on the roof, and the whole thing just blows. The whole base blows. And his line here is, "We all need to sleep at night," referring back to the conversation they had earlier and giving us another glimpse into his humanity here, which I thought was nice. Then we get a chase scene between the Slave One and a couple of TIE fighters that take off in pursuit. This action scene does not last all that long because of another wonderful callback, another wonderful Easter egg to longtime Star Wars fans. We get to see the seismic charges or sonic bombs. I've seen them called both things in use by the Slave One that we first saw in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. They were one of my favorite things in the prequels. One of the things that stick out to me as like, oh, that was so cool in the prequels, and very cool here too, just as satisfying to hear that noise as they explode and take out those TIE fighters.
That's Star Tours: The Adventures Continue. The
Yeah.
one segment where Boba Fett shows up, and like I love that the Star Speeder just shoots it and it flies back at Boba Fett, but just having that sound and the wave hitting is, that would be, if I could choose one weapon in the Star Wars universe that I could have, it'd be the sonic bomb.
I gotta wonder if that has ever been available in a video game. I feel like they must have. Is that available in Squadrons anywhere, or because there was that Jango Fett video game, Bounty Hunter. I don't know if you ever flew the Slave One in that one, but I feel like that would be such a cool weapon. I'm sure you couldn't have too many of them because they're kind of overpowered, but it would be such a cool weapon to use in a video game. Um, so Mayfeld, they land back on the ground in the jungle, and Mayfeld is kind of like accepted his fate, and he's ready to have the binders put back on his wrists. And he says, "Good luck getting your kid back." And Cara Dune, at this point, she decides to let him go because he was such an asset. He did help them, and then he blew up the Imperial base. And she says to Mando, "It's too bad Mayfeld didn't make it out alive back there," which is just their way of saying that they're gonna pretend like he died and let him go off and live his life on his own. Were you happy to see
So
that?
yes, that was a perfect wrap up. I mean, it definitely threw back to some of the movies of the past of, oh, he didn't make it out alive, so, and then he just disappears. But that moment is one of those human moments that we all really crave, especially nowadays. And it was showed, like, not only was it a touching moment, but it was also kind of a, oh yeah, too bad he didn't make it. So it had a little bit of a nod to the, yeah, get out of here. But
Yeah.
also, the seismic charge or sonic bomb showed up in Star Wars Empire at War, Star Wars Empire at War, The Force of Corruption, Star Wars Rogue Squadron 3 Rebel Strike.
Okay, so it has been in a video game. That's pretty cool. So they got the coordinates they need for Moff Gideon, and Mayfeld watches the Slave One take off. He's gonna go off to maybe come back eventually or be on his own adventures. I hope we see more of him.
He'll show up in his own spin-off in 2 seasons.
Yeah, Mayfeld, a Star Wars story coming soon to no
Stuck on
theaters
a
near
planet.
you. And then the final scene, we see Moff Gideon right there in the concept art. He receives a holo transmission on his ship, and we get a very funny and very fitting callback to Moff Gideon's speech from the end of season one, where he says, "You have something that I want," and now it's Mando talking to Moff Gideon in a different context, using the same words, and it ends with, "He means more to me than you will ever know." I did want to mention something that I didn't mention earlier that's come up a couple times in this episode is now other characters are calling Grogu Mando's kid. And Mando hasn't said that himself, but this is a discussion people have been having for months about
Yeah.
the relationship between these two characters and how he's the Dadalorian or whatever, and he's like basically taken on this role of Grogu's father, which other characters are starting to acknowledge it in the show. And basically with this line, "He means more to me than you'll ever know," like that got to me a little bit. Like he has formed a bond with Grogu and he wants to see what's best for him. He wants him to find his way in the galaxy and make his own decisions. Now Grogu did reach out with the Force and maybe contact another Jedi, or maybe he's going to choose his own path. But before he can do that, Mando has to get him back from Moff Gideon. So, what did you think of that final scene?
It was very touching, and like you said, it got to me a little bit. And I do agree about the Mando being Grogu's father or father figure, and I think that could be something that plays into season 3 when hopefully a Jedi shows up at the end of the next episode, and then season 3 is about you know Grogu and my two dads, maybe. But it'll be something that will definitely be addressed next season. This season, this next episode's going to be the all-out fight, and
Mm-hmm.
the two things that I really am excited to see. I predict, well, three things. We're going to see a Jedi at the end. We don't know which Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be something with the dark saber. That's got to play into it, and maybe we'll see either Ahsoka or Bo-Katan show up in the war, and then I think that we're going to see Grogu pull out his Force powers and really kick butt at some point.
Oh yeah, I think all those things are very likely. I've been predicting for weeks and weeks now that Luke Skywalker is going to show up in this show, and I think the tease, the very end of this next episode might be a good place to do that. The other thing that occurred to me in the past week, this like long shot prediction that I want to make that I've already made to you on Slack, but I want to say it here publicly is that we don't know who directed this last episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian. They haven't announced that. Now, I kind of assumed it was going to be Deborah Chow because besides Taika Waititi, who was very busy, Deborah Chow was the only other director from season 1 who hasn't come back yet for season 2. So I thought, okay, finale is going to be Deborah Chow again, but we don't know that. And you'd think it was Deborah Chow, they would have just come out and said it. So my prediction is that this season finale, this coming episode, was directed by George Lucas. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just throwing it out there. He's known to have been on the set. He's buddies with Dave Filoni. He's Dave Filoni's mentor, basically. I can see Dave Filoni extending an invitation to George Lucas. Come and direct an episode of The Mandalorian, and what better episode than the season finale to do that? So.
And yeah, if especially if it ties into the original trilogy somehow because of a Jedi, if Luke does show up or whoever we actually see shows up, if it's something that's a throwback, that'd be perfect. Question for you, Mike.
Yeah.
Do you ever remember a TV show where at the end of the TV show, you're almost as excited to see who directed it as the entire TV show as we are for these?
Yeah. No, I don't. I don't remember that ever. But I did know that this one was going to be Rick Famuyiwa because in the Disney Gallery series, they talked about him having done one for season 2 as well. So we knew that he was going to have one. I didn't think it was going to be the finale, so I thought, okay, Mayfeld is back. He was in one of the other Rick Famuyiwa episodes. So that was my guess for this week. So I was right about that. The George Lucas thing is just a shot a shot in the dark. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but we will find out at the end of this week's episode who that is. And yes, I am excited to see whatever that name is.
Friday at 12, hopefully at 1 o'clock your time and 4 o'clock my time in the morning.
Right.
Hopefully it's a longer episode than the 30 some odd minutes. We get like a full hour or even a 90-minute would be great. But I know that normally I don't send you a message, but somehow I feel like we'll both be starting at the exact same time and finishing at the exact same time, so we can have that conversation right away.
Yeah, I did stay up for the season premiere this year at midnight to watch it, and then my sleep schedule got so screwed up by that I haven't done it since then. But I think for the finale, I'll have to do that again just to see it as it goes up. But yeah, that's our discussion of the penultimate episode of Mandalorian for this season. Thank you to Jeremiah Good for joining me here, looking at some merch, talking about the show. And I think, unless you got something else to say, Jeremiah, do you?
Just I'll put the doobie plug in. Hey, if you've enjoyed this show, don't forget to like us, ring our bell, subscribe, share with your friends. We do this. Well, I guess we have one more Mando Monday, and then that's it because we got a couple of more days until the season finale, and I'm still hoping that you do we watch you having a reaction video to the season finale.
Oh, right. That's something else I promised I would do is set up a camera. But we'll see. I will try to do that. I think that's going to wrap up this episode of Mando Mondays here on Laughing Place. Thank you for reminding people to like and subscribe because I always forget that. So good idea. Thanks for watching, and always visit laughingplace.com for all your Disney news and opinions. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for having me. See you guys soon.